A lot of us tend to think the accent of wherever we're from is the roughest sounding one. Like if you're from the US, you may think our accent is harsh, while the British accent is a lot nicer. But here's the thing. This doesn't just have to apply to the kind of accent your country speaks, but it can go as deep as the accent your local region speaks. I'm from South Jersey, so I grew up with most of the people in my life speaking Philadelphian. And if I'm going to be honest, the Philadelphia accent has to be the ugliest sounding accent in the US. You may be thinking, am I just saying that because it's the one I hear on a daily basis? That may be true, but even if that's the case, it's not going to change my opinion. Once I started studying phonetics, I purposely started to change some of the pronunciation quirks this area does because I was trying to speak more properly, and also because I noticed the younger generation here tends to have less of a Philly accent and more closer to that of general American. For example, I used to always say wooder instead of water because I thought it was the right way to say it since that was the way I heard it all the time, but I changed it a couple years ago. But there's some other weird ways Philadelphians say things, and some of them can really get under my skin. That's what I'm going to dive into today. I'd like to start off with something that happens with the ah sound. In American English and much of Canadian English, the ah sound turns into a longer, tenser eh when it comes before an M or an N, as in lamb or hand. But in Philadelphia, this also occurs when it comes before an F or an S, as in half and pass. That's how I used to say those words, and you'll hear it if you watch my older videos. Until a couple years ago, when I changed them to half and pass, because I thought it sounded more proper. However, I'll tell you it was rare, if ever, that I would go as far as to say half and pass. That's just too much. It was pass, not pass. And yet I hear certain people around here, especially the elderly, saying those words over the top like that so naturally. Another thing about that sound that I simply don't understand is that there's this weird split here in Philly when an A comes before a D. What I mean is, there's the word mad, bad, and glad, and then there's ad, sad, and dad. It doesn't make sense to me. People with the New York City accent pronounce all 6 of those words with eh, which makes it a lot more consistent than the way Philly does it. Speaking of the New York accent, I don't see people with that accent on an everyday basis, but I'll hear it in the media, most commonly from football commentators. But as far as I've heard, when they say a word like bad, it's simply just bad. I've yet to hear one of them go as far as to go bad. That's one of the reasons why I would take their accent over ours any day. There are also certain words the people around me do the ass sound with, where even when they aren't over the top, they just don't sound right to me, which I've simply always used ah for, even before I changed the way I pronounce things. But instead of dragging it on for longer by telling you which of those words I'm thinking of, I'm just going to hop into the next thing. This next thing I'm going to discuss is the thing that can really make me crazy. You know the thing I was just talking about, which happens with the ah sound? If you're from around here, people do something similar with the ow sound that you'll hear in a word like cow, where it turns into more of an ow, as in cow. The main reason I can't stand that sound is because to me, it sounds like one day somebody said, you know how ah can become ah? Well, the start of ow does kind of sound like ah, so why don't we start off with more of an ah and apply it to any word with ow just for the heck of it? I first noticed someone say ow about 1.5 years ago. I don't remember what the word was, but I remember it being my first time noticing it, and I thought maybe it was just their own thing. But then I started to notice more and more people doing it, even my mom sometimes, and it just got more and more annoying. The fact that it rolls off the tongue for some people is difficult for me to comprehend. It seems to me that the words down, now, and out are the top 3 words that Philadelphians love to go ow with. The word out is the one I particularly don't understand, Because you don't hear Philadelphians pronounce the word at like at, but they sure like to say out. But you know what's even worse? When they take that sound a step further and go ew. There are certain people that'll do that, as in down and now. It's the linguistic equivalent to nails on a chalkboard for me, and it makes me cringe even harder than I already do for a regular L. And also, because of how the sound an L makes is similar to the W at the end of ow, there are some people around here that'll do the same thing when a short A comes before an L. If I hear another Philadelphian or South Jerseyan say, "I'll take a salad," I'm gonna lose my marbles. But there are other pronunciation quirks this city has which I'm not too fond of. Another one is the thing they do with the long O and U sounds, where they'll say O and ew. So boat and moose becomes boat and moose. Believe it or not, that's yet another thing I used to do a lot, especially as a little kid. But again, I purposely changed the way I made the two sounds, because once I started looking into phonetics, it started to no longer sound like proper English to me. If I had to say which of the two I find particularly annoying, I'd say the thing with the long U sound. I think it's because at least you'll hear O from a lot of people in southern England, and it sounds better over there, or from some other Americans on the East Coast. But the long ew is like our own thing, at least to the extent that we do it. And it's also another thing that my mom does sometimes. She'll say something like, "What you gonna do?" It makes me crazy. It just sounds very whiny. I always feel like opening my mic and saying, "Come on, it's do, not do. I'm not asking you to say duel." There's also some individual words Philadelphians and South Jersey people say which I don't get. I already mentioned wooder at the start of this video, but there's some other bizarre words. The first one I'm going to discuss leads me into another sound which is often associated with the New York City accent, which I hear the elderly in Philadelphia also do sometimes. It occurs with the aw sound in a word like thought, where it becomes more of an aw, like thought. I don't mind that one as much because it kind of sounds cool, but here's the thing. If you go down to the next generation of Philadelphians and South Jersey people, they don't typically make that sound except for in one single word. And that word is daughter. So they'll say, "I had a cup of coffee and I took the dog for a walk with my daughter." I feel like I'm the first to notice this, and it makes zero sense to me. What makes the word daughter so special from the rest of the all words? Another Philly single word pronunciation that gets on my nerves due to the lack of consistency is how instead of forehead, a lot of them say farhead. Yes, there are certain words where we'd say orange in Florida, where most other Americans would say orange in Florida. But that's because the OR comes before a pronounced vowel. But what really makes the word farhead thing weird to me is those people don't say far arm or far sight, or with any other word starting with FORE, except farhead. This is yet another example of what I would call linguistic hypocrisy, just like with the daughter thing. I first noticed it when I heard my mom say it. I apologize, Mom, that I mentioned you for the third time, but when I first heard her say that, my thoughts were, "I'm sorry, what?" The last thing I'd like to talk about that Philadelphians do is a bit different from everything else I mentioned in this video, because rather than a pronunciation quirk, it's something grammatical. The people around here where I'm from don't know how to use the word anymore correctly. Think of it being used in a sentence such as, "The world isn't cheap anymore." That's the normal and correct way to use it. But the people around here will say something like, "The world is so expensive anymore." Come on, you're adults who went to college. You should know how that word simply doesn't work when it's used in a positive. And there's a word called nowadays for when you want to use it like that. Think about it. If you had something to eat on a given day, would you go up to someone and tell them, I had anything to eat today. I don't think so. In conclusion, the Philadelphia accent, at least in my humble opinion, is basically everything that could be wrong with the regional accent. It has sounds that don't mix together, it's whiny and nasal sounding, it's filled with inconsistencies, and it simply doesn't sound like proper English. I feel bad for any British person immigrating from the UK to Philadelphia. I bet they're thinking, oh dear, is this what American English sounds like? I'm certainly not a fan. Anyways, don't go away yet, because there is one more thing I don't like about the Philly accent. This one isn't directly related to the accent itself, but it's simply the fact it brainwashed me into believing that some of the things said around here are the correct ways to say them. And as I had mentioned earlier, the younger generation is speaking with not as much of a Philly accent. And there's things they do which I think is weird, since I'm used to hearing the way the older people talk. I'll give you a couple examples. Take a word like animal, banana, or damage. That's how I've always said those words. It's not like the A in the word like hand or lamb, because the M or the N comes directly before another vowel. However, it doesn't matter for the younger generation. They're saying animal, banana, and damage. That may be how most Americans pronounce those words, but living in South Jersey all my life, they sound off to me. Especially when they take the ass sound to the extreme in those words. More recently, I discovered another thing I hear Philadelphians that are closer to my age doing. You know the thing I talked about with how the oldest generation is going aw for words with the aw sound. Some people in the youngest generation are doing the exact opposite thing with that sound, where the words with aw are being pronounced with ah, so that la and thought become rhyming words, la and thought. I don't get it. It doesn't sound right to me at all. I'm aware that most Western dialects do the same thing, and they call it the cot-caught merger. But let's keep it on the West. What makes English a fun language is the variety of different sounds we have. Why do we have to eliminate one altogether? It makes our language more dull and boring. Cot and caught are two completely different sounds here. Anyways, I hope this video gave you all a good laugh. Now I will ask if you can like and subscribe, and have a very blessed day. This is DrayYoutube584 signing out. Also, go Birds, and Dallas sucks anymore.
Whenever I want to say I just can't, it's time for me to make a brand new rant.